Welcome to Chapter 18, Creating a Motivating Climate. This video link is from one of my favorite movies, Facing the Giants. It does a really good job of demonstrating how a coach can motivate their team. We'll watch this in class. Directing is the fourth phase of management, and that's where we're going to find motivation included in your textbook. Motivation may be defined as the force within the individual that influences or directs the behavior. Because motivation comes from within a person, managers cannot directly motivate subordinates. The humanistic manager can, however, create an environment that maximizes the development of the human potential. The leader needs to focus on the needs and wants of that individual and use those to motivate the individuals appropriately. Strategies to create a motivating climate. I'd like you to read through these and be familiar with them. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. I want you to be able to determine the difference between the two. Intrinsic motivation is the internal drive to do something or to be something. Extrinsic motivation is the motivation that is enhanced by the job environment or the external rewards associated with motivation. I want you to take a few moments and think about who is your greatest motivator. Has it always been the greatest, has that person always been the greatest motivator, or has it changed over time? Could you list the strongest motivator for the significant others in your life? If so, have you ever used this awareness to motivate those people to do something specific? We're going to need to talk about a few motivational theories. Several of these are going to appear familiar. Mayo did the Hawthorne studies, and in that process felt that leaders should make people feel important while they were doing their work, and that this would result in an increased autonomy and an increase in motivation. Maslow should be familiar to you. It's based on the hierarchy of needs, with the understanding that an unmet need would trigger activity and that makes the unmet need the motivator. Skinner researched operant conditioning, believing that if an employer wanted a certain behavior to continue, that the employer needed to reinforce the behavior they sought. Harsberg looked at the motivation and hygiene theory, believing that people were motivated by the work itself. Room did the expectancy model, where what the person expects out of the environment will influence their behavior. So the manager needs to know what the expected rewards are for that individual employee. McClellan believed that people had a basic need to achieve, to be affiliated, and to have power within an organization, and that these things intrinsically motivated people. Geller recommended stretching, or assigning a task that challenges an individual employee so that they would learn a new experience, with the reminder that stretching should be intermittent and not cause stress and frustration for the employee. McGregor is one that we've talked about already, theory X and Y. I want to remind you that the manager's assumptions about the employees can positively or negatively impact that employee's performance and motivate them or demotivate them. This is a more in-depth look of Harsberg's motivation and hygiene factors. I do want you to be able to determine what an emotional motivator factor is versus a functional, which is also referred to as a hygiene factor. When we think about motivation, we often think about incentives. Promotion and individual recognition are two ways that we can incentivize employees. Organizations must be cognizant or aware of the need to offer incentives at a level where employees value them. This requires the organization and its management understand employees' collective values and devise a reward system that is consistent with that value system. It's important for leaders to go to their team and say, how are you motivated? What kinds of incentives do you value? You may have an employee that values a handwritten thank you note, whereas another may value a gift card, or flowers, or maybe an extra day off. Everyone is motivated and incentivized by different things. If you have the opportunity within an organization to do a promotion, you may need to determine whether you're going to recruit internally or externally. Remember that an internal promotion recognizes individual excellence of someone that's already committed to the team. There are times in a culture change or a need for a different leadership style or different skill set, you may have to go external to hire someone into a promoted position. Whichever direction you choose to use, you want to be clear about the criteria of the position. You want to evaluate only qualified candidates. You need to handle rejected applicants professionally. You need to notify them of their non-selection, and you need to give them feedback about their interview. If you are an employer or a manager and someone on your team has been promoted, you need to be the one cheering loudest for them and release them from their current position as quickly as possible from your organization and allow them to move on. Recognition results in positive reinforcements, but again, it goes back to needing to be very specific to the individual. And if we're going to recognize excellence, then we need to do that as close to the time in which the affirming behavior has occurred. If someone provided really good patient care and you want to recognize that, it's not as effective to wait until the very end of the month when you're doing your employee training or staff meeting to recognize their excellence. When it's so many weeks later, it's more important to pull them aside and tell them personally how proud you are of them and what a good job that they've done. Self-care, when we think about motivation, really allows us to refill our well, catch our breath, balance our emotional and physical wellness, and it allows us to be more in tune and receptive to being motivated. It is important for us to take care of ourselves so that we're in a good place and that we can self-motivate, intrinsically motivate ourselves because we're settled and we're rested and we're well. When we are extended beyond measure, we are worn out, we're frazzled, and we're stressed. We are not likely to find internal or external motivation in any way or shape. So it's important that we avoid burnout as much as possible. The most important strategy that we can use for preventing burnout is self-care. It's important that we take this step, and one of the keys to self-care is building relationships at work and maintaining personal connections with people that we value at work. It allows us to maintain a healthy network within our work environment. I love the idea of finding joy at work. Our author suggests that we find joy at work through multiple pathways, by being connected to others, from finding joy in the work itself and just being a nurse. Some of our joy can come from achievement, accomplishments, or positive work outcomes. And sometimes our joy comes from recognition. Wherever your joy is, it's important to stay connected to that so that you will always remain anchored and excited by the career of being a nurse.